Hey, beautifuls. So, Aaron Kleinerman is going to join me for this live stream, so I'm just going to wait till he jumps on. But in the meantime, until he does, I'll let you know that we are going to be sharing about vulnerability and what it's like when a woman is really vulnerable with a man, and really exploring like different levels of vulnerability. So, he's not on. Okay. There we go. We're going to try Adam now because hopefully this will work. Yes! Yay!
Yay! I'm here.
No, I missed you. I was like, where is he?
Yay! Amazing. I love technology.
Yeah, beautiful. Just here. I
Right.
was getting a bit vulnerable about the live stream not working.
Yeah, right? It's so funny, this Facebook thing. Sometimes it works so well, and other times it's just like, no, it have a mind of its own.
Yeah, awesome.
Hmm.
I was just really explaining to our amazing audience. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. I was like, where were we? Just understanding more about, I guess we're going to explore some of the levels of vulnerability. So Aaron and I have just had a really vulnerable conversation, and we're running an event together here on the Gold Coast on May 19th and 20th called The Art of Loving Men. And one of the things, and it's a women's workshop, but on the day two we're bringing in men to explore some of these things with, so such as exploring our vulnerabilities and really sharing our vulnerabilities. So I thought it was really appropriate that I had to actually show up today and have a vulnerable conversation with Aaron, and which he held me so beautifully in. And yeah, I just thought it was a good opportunity to share that and share, I guess, what it's also like for a man to experience a woman being vulnerable. And because sometimes I feel like there's an avoidance of vulnerability and a fear of appearing needy, which has actually happened for me with an ex-lover who, when I started to really share some emotions and really share some vulnerabilities, it became a bit too much for him, because I felt that he had this energy on that neediness is bad, or neediness means responsibility, or neediness. Yeah, like that there's this energy of that, we shouldn't be needy, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, welcome everyone. My name's Aaron. Great to be here with you all. Yeah, I mean, I find for myself, vulnerability is that piece that I'm most afraid of. It's sharing the thing. I always say when I'm working with someone one-on-one or working in a group, it's like sharing that thing that you're most terrified of sharing is always the juiciest thing. It's that piece that like is hiding underneath the depths of the soul that's wanting to come forth. And it's through these, through the conversation like we were just having, to really experience the depth of your vulnerability, the things that you were afraid of sharing. For me, it allowed me to experience you more. It allowed me to experience more of your heart, more of your true self. And I feel like in the world we live in, there's a lot of the facades. There's a lot of covering up that we show. And to letting go of that and to really being able to, share ourselves openly and vulnerably with another is one of the greatest gifts that we can give. And in many ways, it's just these protective layers that are trying to stop the heart from really experiencing itself into the world that inhibits us, that inhibits our growth, and inhibits, the potentiality of greater connection. And that, I more than anything, I feel like is why we're here, to have those moments of vulnerability so that we actually can experience the depth of greater love between two people, between many, and between ourselves.
Yeah, beautiful. So I feel like I'm going to be quite vulnerable and share a little bit about our conversation that we had before.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. At first, when I told Aaron, I was like, Aaron, I would love to have a really vulnerable conversation with you. Are you open to hearing it? And and maybe we'll do a live stream. And I had to jump at first because at first I thought we were going to do it on the live stream, have the vulnerable conversation. I'm like, oh, that feels really itchy. I said, maybe we'll just talk first, and then we'll talk about the vulnerable conversation. So, wasn't quite ready for that level of vulnerability yet. But one of the things that I felt really like, I felt like that you, Aaron, was held a really safe space for me to be vulnerable. And one of the things that I addressed at the start was, I know that most men love vulnerability from my experience and from what I've learned. And so there was this piece to me that I really need to address to make sure that my vulnerability was coming from a place of authenticity, of not wanting to be liked, not wanting to be pleased, not wanting to make you feel good or any of that. Like, it was like, no, I really want to be authentic and share what's really real, no matter what your responses, no matter what your thoughts were, whether it was going to be like love or judgment or, you know, whatever. It was like more about me sharing without it being tailored to what might be the safest way for you to receive it, something along those lines.
Yeah, and my experience, and we were talking about this a little bit, is like, I find vulnerability often comes from the space of the heart and the soul. And because all of us in our lives, we have a great ability of our mind and our body and our personality to grab onto these different pieces of vulnerability and say, oh, I was really vulnerable in that share before with that individual, and as a result, I gained this from it. So instead of it becoming like a vulnerable share that's spontaneous, that's free, that's alive, the mind body, because it likes to kind of colonize our being and take control over how we're experiencing the world, will take that vulnerability and it will like cut a cord into the experience to then say, oh, I can share this vulnerability and I'm going to get this. And I'm going to look like I'm being really vulnerable and soft and sweet. But really the unconscious motive behind it is that I'm trying to either protect or I'm trying to receive something. But really the joy of spontaneous, free, alive vulnerability has no agenda. It has no attachment. It just is simply saying, hey, this is what's alive inside my being. Sometimes it's dirty, it's dark, it's ugly. And that's where the juiciest things happen. So when we can see someone else doing that and shift away from the lens of, oh, they're bad, and projecting all of our defensive means of saving ourselves and allowing ourselves to be free, then my experience for you know, with our conversation we had, is that I experienced a greater depth of connection with you, because I could start to just see you being like alive and free and taking away some of the walls that I know I see, because I do the same thing in other connections within myself. And that to me is the most important thing when it comes to relating with ourselves, and not only relating with others too. It's like cutting away the cords of protective means so that we can actually experience genuine vulnerability.
Yeah, beautiful. And what I've seen in myself and a lot of women is this underlying need to please men, to appear likable, to prove ourselves, and so to tailor what we're saying or trying to say the right thing, and avoiding the vulnerability or avoiding this appearing to be needy, which we'll talk about shortly. And so I just really interesting, and I've noticed myself sometimes had to stand back and look at, is this vulnerability coming from this like really authentic place? And I think it's like looking at, am I trying to be liked or something like that? So it's for me, it's like having to take my time to drop in, to be like, what's really true here? Like, what is, and the words that I'm saying, are they coming out authentically, and not trying to word things in a way that will be like, this person will like me more, kind of thing.
Say it a particular way. And then one of the things we spoke about was just that, those moments of awkwardness, those moments of times when you're connecting with someone and you need to have a conversation, and you both recognize that there's a lot of like it can be friction, it can be awkwardness. I was sharing with EJ, you know, a recent kind of lover that came into my life, and just having a few moments of like really deep, profound awkwardness, and realizing that I said some of the strangest things, and I said these things of trying to protect my own heart because my animal inside was hurting. My animal inside was wanting something, and I was trying to find the right thing to say to make it a better situation. But all of that just created more and more separation. So again, it just proved to me that the moment the mind comes in to try to please, or as Armina was asking about, like trying to rescue, all of these things that are coming up into life, whether we're pleasing, whether we're rescuing, whether we're trying to not let go of control, it's all of these cords that this human body that our soul is incarnated into has found resources and ways to protect us. So when we're trying to rescue someone, we're often not willing to look at what's inside of our own self, and we're putting more focus and attention into someone else. Or when we're trying to please someone, it's a very similar chord. It's like, I want to make you feel happy so that I don't actually have to look at the deep levels of unworthiness and pain and disgust inside of me. And one of the most powerful things that we can do, and this is one of the things that, you know, we discussed in the conversation, was like, when that comes up, is to literally communicate that, to say to your friend, to your beloved, say, I'm feeling a little bit awkward. Like, I'm feeling there's some things happening right now, and I just want to voice it, because by drawing awareness to the shadow, by drawing awareness to the things that aren't being said, then it brings it, you could say, to the light. It's not really to the light, that light is better than dark, but it brings it up into the consciousness so that it's not hiding, and it's not the mind body and the mind's way of trying to protect it. It's like, hey, this is feeling really weird and awkward, and I recognize that there's some kind of stagnant energy here, and we need to get a little bit deeper. And that, to me, is the vulnerability of saying, I don't have the answer. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that some conversation, something needs to happen or shift or be discussed here so we can experience the vulnerability of our heart to a greater degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's taking me back to some moments on the weekend where I felt some awkwardness, and I wanted to share on here just a couple of things. I want to go into everything because we'd be here for a while. With the ways that I've showed up with Aaron that was avoiding vulnerability. And so what we just did is I had that vulnerable conversation to really address that. And look at the way that I actually put up a wall. And this is reflected out into a number of different connections with different men. And I'm at that point now, and I'm like, I don't want to play this out anymore. I don't want to keep friend zoning men or avoiding intimate connections when there might be something more to explore there, but haven't even been making myself available to it. So one of the things that I share with Aaron is when I first met Aaron, I totally put him in this friend zone. And even the idea of planning an event together was a way of me creating safety, getting to know him in a friendship level, because I had this story that he wouldn't be interested in getting to know me if I didn't offer him something. And so it was this kind of like, well, if we plan this event together, we'll get to know each other. He seems really cool. I'm really drawn to his energy. And, he's a powerful man, and he's got a lot of knowledge. He's really intelligent. And these are sometimes the men I feel a bit intimidated by. And so what I did is I kind of put him over in the event planning co-facilitator friendship role, instead of actually exploring more maybe a friendship, or it is a friendship, but maybe an intimate connection that I might have felt drawn to. So it was really interesting, and it was really it was so good to actually really express that to you, Aaron, and just to get that out and be like, this is how I've been showing. It's because it's not just with you, it's with other men that I feel similarly about, that I just put in a place that is a place of protection, because underneath that is obviously there's a lot of vulnerabilities there for me around rejection, but also things like around intelligent men, and maybe my intelligence won't be good enough, and or someone else that works in tantra, and what if they find out I'm a fraud and I'm not really all that tantric, and what if these stories.
What if I'm the imposter? I'll figure out I'm the imposter. Oh my God.
Yeah, right. And so I just spoke all of that, and then I on the weekend we were both at Taste of Love, um, and you know I went into kind of avoiding Aaron. I'm kind of like speaking to the audience, and like, but I went into noticing how much I kind of avoided connecting too much, because there was this kind of like, you're in this box over here, and I like if I explore any kind of touch, like it's just like not showing, like avoiding that kind of vulnerability. Um, so it was really interesting for me to notice, but then to actually like call myself on it and be like, hey, I want to talk about this, and I'm actually going to I really need to really look at it and actually have the conversation with the person. So to have that conversation with Aaron and say, this is what's been in my space between us, and now I feel like we've opened up a new, like this, a more open connection, a more like vulnerable connection, a more open communication, which I think will really filter through in our workshop, which will be amazing. Yeah, it's like a transmission.
Yeah, and there's a couple things that come to mind for that for me is like the protective walls that are placed. In many ways, they're the ways of not forcing ourselves to get an authentic yes or an authentic no. Because there's so much, and I find this in myself sometimes if I'm avoiding a connection or I'm avoiding something with someone, I don't actually want to go up and address what it is I'm avoiding because I'm terrified of either receiving a yes, of saying, wow, I want to deepen in what's here, or terrified of that fear of rejection. So the boundaries that are created are really just great ways of avoiding the authentic yes and no, which then keep us in this very ambivalent space of the mind stepping in and saying, well, you're not willing to get a yes and no, so I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to try to figure out this and understand this situation and get all this understanding, when in actuality, one of the most difficult things that any one of us can do is to authentically state our desire and say, hey, I'm into you. I'd like to spend a little bit more time. Like, what does that feel like? And also doing it in a way where it's like part of the thing I love about, you could say, this conscious sexuality field is that it puts things up it puts the shadow up into the light, and it forces us to have conversations that aren't necessarily there all the time. And it forces this space of saying, well, I'm a little bit uncomfortable here, but I'm going to bring this forward anyways. And when I do bring that forward, and if I can do it without the agenda of, I need to go have sex, or I need to go have this intimacy, it's just like, when the agendas go away and we realize on a soul level the reason that we have this desire, this longing for more connection, is so that we can actually just experience greater depths of love between each other. And that doesn't have to be this love that's like bound by a finger around not a finger, the thing that you put on your finger when you're married. It's like all this societal things that say, oh, if I'm going to go have this conversation, then I'm going to have to go marry this person. And it's crazy because we, like, whether or not it's spoken, there's so much of that happens that, like, we're afraid to just deepen with the unknowingness of what a connection can be. Because sometimes the greatest connections can just be these beautiful friendships, and that can have intimacy, that can have connection, but does not mean that we always need to sleep with one another. And it's like this reprogramming of the neurology of our conditioning to allow, and I felt this the last few months I was living in this beautiful community and in this great training down in New Zealand. And a lot of it was just living with a group of 20, 25 people and realizing that there was a part of my animal body that loves just to feel connected and to hold another and to be held and to feel touch and just to feel warm bodies next to me, and not needing to go into deep, powerful intercourse or penetration and sex, just wanting that yearning for that touch and that connection. Because so much of the world is like just behind the computer, and just driving in their cars. Oh, look at these other robots driving in the car. And now we're going down the street. I can't say hi to that person because then they might think I like them. I can't be friendly to that person because I can't give them too much friend. Oh my God, they think that, oh my God, I might actually like them. And it's like the mind body is just running these wild stories when in actuality, we just want to feel a greater like connection and longing to another being to say, hey, you've come into this form. I've come into this form. There's animal bodies just want to feel one another and to cuddle one another and to hold one another. And it doesn't mean that we're going to have to have sex with one another. It's like it's a shifting of the neurology. It's a shifting of the conditions. And that's where the vulnerability of admitting that longing really comes into play.
Yeah, that was juicy. And what I have discovered and it came up over the weekend was this kind of thing of if I give a man a little bit of intimacy or a little bit of touch or eye contact or smiling or something, there's this fear of like if I give him a little bit, then he's going to want more. And like you were saying before, it's like really being able to be authentic in my yeses and my nos. But there's almost this like unwillingness to even put myself in that position. And so then I end up avoiding connection, but yet I deeply long for it. And I actually allowed myself to be an observer to that on the weekend and allowed myself to go into more intimate connections with touch. You know, I didn't have sex with anyone. I didn't explore it any further. And it was so beautiful just to explore intimacy with men that didn't involve needing to have to go to anywhere or there be any agenda on there. And I really, really loved that. And I think it's what you said before. We're starting to rewire and see. And I feel like sometimes, I guess women feel like there's an agenda with men with that, you know, if I give him this much, then he's going to want sex. And I'm imagining, and from what I've heard from men, is like there's kind of this, if you give a woman something, then she's going to want a relationship. And like there's some kind of like these agendas, which, you know, if we take all of that away, you know, what's there and what's possible to experience in these moments without it needing to go anywhere. I know so many women that they go on one date and they're already planning, they're already romantic dreaming about this person that they're going to be with for like, you know, get married and have kids and their kids' names. And the guy's like, oh, I'm just here to get laid.
Well, and that story goes both ways. I mean, one of the biggest things I know in my own life is dissolving and really putting to the fire the romantic fantasies, because so much of the romantic fantasies are built into these conditions. And I've watched myself inside of connections and relationships build these massive, like, I'm so not in the moment that I've built this entire paradigm of how our life is going to be, because it's like this, my woman inside is like, oh, the romance, the sweetness, it's so yummy. And it's like I forget about just actually being with what is. And what is, in a couple times with previous, you know, connections was a little traumatic and troublesome, that I wasn't willing to look at that because I fell in love with a fantasy. And I wasn't willing to be vulnerable enough to communicate my uncomfortability inside of the connection. And, you know, this piece around, like, I think sometimes there's a fear for both a woman and a man to really share their vulnerability, because then they might be taken advantage of. Their vulnerability might be used against them. So as a result, and especially this happens in this polarization that happens between kind of masculine and feminine, is like the masculine in the woman starts to come in and like creates all of these more intricate layers to protect her own woman from allowing yourself to be vulnerable. So then it's just this deep protection of, I'm okay, I don't need anything. But really, as you're saying, there's a longing inside to be fucked, to be open, to be like share and love. And the same exact thing happens, you know, for men in these male bodies. Is like, you know, the masculine's even more protected, but really, again, there's this deep longing for a woman inside that's just yearning for that connection, that's yearning for something more, that wants that vulnerability, that wants that. And then this kind of gets us into the second piece around the neediness. What happens as a result of that neediness is that because the vulnerability isn't being met, there's this projected neediness back and forth, where really the neediness in many ways is just coming from the willingness to share the desire. But if one partner inside of that exchange isn't recognize their own desires, then they can project the other person's desires as a level of neediness and saying, oh, well, you're just being needy and you need this and you need that. But in actuality, it's the other person's way of protecting their own heart that really wants to be vulnerable and open, but is terrified of that. So then it just projects this mask, this blockade of saying, I actually don't need anything, and I'm just going to yell and scream at you and pretend like, I have no neediness, and all the neediness that I judge inside of others is now being projected upon you, and I'm going to sit up on my righteous pedestal, and everything's going to feel good. And I know that because I've sat on both exchanges of it. I've done the I don't like you because you're being too needy and you want too much from me. And I've been on the other side of it being like, come on, babe, like I want to spend time with you. No, you're being too needy. I don't need this. And it's like, fuck. It's all these layers that are just inhibiting connection. Yeah.
I can feel the passion, Aaron. I can feel the passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyone listening, if you have questions or something else you want to go into, feel free to ask in here. Go ahead.
Yes, please. We love questions. Well, I love questions. So I feel there's a lot of energy on neediness, on the neediness is like tainted to be bad or wrong, and we should be self-sufficient and we shouldn't need anyone and we shouldn't rely on a man and vice versa, right? But I found that, particularly when it's around being heard or sharing my emotions, and even with an ex-lover, like I was feeling unsafe at one point and I needed reassurance from him that, that things were safe or that he still was feeling similar things. And when I shared this with him, he felt pressure. And there was this kind of like, oh, like this feels weird for me to... And then eventually I realized that it was he was very self-sufficient, very independent, very like, I don't need anyone to help me, and more so played the rescuer, that it was his own judgment on the neediness that was being, and that's why he had kind of like a bit of an inability to receive anything that I was asking for and support. But also there was like a lack of boundaries around what he could provide. And being under boundaried and then being over boundaried. So it's interesting to explore the concept of neediness, because I think we're so in a world that really makes it so like that you shouldn't be needy. But underneath that, like I feel like there's this vulnerability underneath that to be explored. So
Yeah, and what comes forward from, neediness can be looked at so many different levels. Ultimately, when, and you speak a lot about this inner marriage, this union between the man and woman is inside, then the way in which we then connect to, the way in which you connect to the outside world is then from a space of wholeness. It's like, if my cup is full and I have this full connection, then when I go and I have connections with other lovers or other beings, there's nothing that I'm unconsciously trying to get from them. But so much of the world is like, it's those unconscious things that we're not willing to admit because we're not willing to be vulnerable. So this connection between vulnerability and neediness is so close, because when we're not fully at this union within ourselves, then the result is then we're trying to fill ourselves up with an external woman or an external man. And then that external woman or man, well, it's like, are they whole and unified inside themselves? And if they're not, then they project their own external thing upon us. So then it creates this codependent relationship. And this is probably 90 to 95% of the relationships that happen in the world. And most people they've come to assume that's the way of relating. And that's one of the things I love with bringing this work out, and like what we're doing in the workshop, is that it's redefining like how we love and connect with an external human being. But more importantly, the first relationship that we have to deepen in is this one in here. So that when we're reaching out and we're connecting with another, yes, there is desires, there is a longing to be held, to be heard, to want that, but it's not coming from a space of an unconscious feeling that we're not filled up from within. So Sam's asking, how did you shift your neediness to this conscious transformed man? I think one of the best ways I've shifted my own self is just fumbling and falling a lot. I mean, I remember I think I'll share this. It was a lover I had last year for about 9-10 months. A beautiful being, shared an incredible connection, and we ended this connection in Egypt. And it was to her walking away, and I was literally on the hotel floor crying and sobbing, like just asking and begging for her to come back to me. And I had never been in such a low, needy, ugly place in my life. And I was sobbing for hours. And then I eventually realized it had nothing to do with her. I had projected so much of my internal woman upon her that her walking away, I literally felt like a part of me was leaving. So I was crying and sobbing because I had shaped all of my neediness, all of my things upon her, and I hadn't owned any of it inside of me. So one of the best way I've transformed is just falling and stumbling and falling and stumbling and fucking up continuously, and continually coming back and saying, you know what, like, this woman inside, this man inside, I don't actually need anyone in my life. There's a lot of beings I love. I love my soul tribe. I love my family. I love all these individuals. But at the end of the night, whether or not there's a warm body next to me, I feel genuinely, definitely not all the time, but generally quite full and complete. And it takes time. It takes a willingness to go inside and really look at the projections, at the different layers that come in with this. And it's a dedication to work. And I think we all want that. It's just whether or not we're willing to admit it and go into it.
Yeah. And for me, one of the things that has really helped me is really cultivating and evolving my inner masculine, or my inner man, and having him hold me and meet my needs, but not coming from a place of protection of, I don't need a man, I can handle my own shit, like this kind of thing, because actually asking for help or asking for support feels vulnerable. It comes from a place of like, yes, I can look after myself, but I'm also willing to be vulnerable and ask for help when I need it.
Yeah.
And give myself permission to do that as well. But not relying, not like what I realized with one of my ex-lovers is that I started to go out of myself with him. It's almost like as soon as a man came into my space, it's like I stopped holding as much space for myself and I started to go into him first. And then I was like, hang on a minute, EJ, no, come back to me first. You know, look at the stuff that's coming up for me, explore that, and then, you know, then share with him instead of just going to the man and being like, blah, like, which sometimes has its value, but like not projecting, right? Not projecting on like, this is all the shit that you need to hear, rah, rah, rah. It was like, okay, like, let me come into self and explore that in myself and what's coming up there, and then speak from this place of vulnerability. So, yeah.
Yeah, and no, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
The other thing that was coming up as you're sharing that, and this is very much on that topic, is like one of the most difficult things that I know I've transversed through and walked through is really like unapologetically communicating and stating my desires and what it is I want. Like, especially when it comes to with a woman, especially when it comes to like in the bedroom, because I've taken very much a role in my life of being like a nice guy, being a guy that can please, that can do the right thing, that knows how to handle things. And it's only sometimes like in the bedroom that very like dark, animalistic, like masculine comes out and brings out. But I'm finding part of my journey right now is bringing that level of like just like taking and saying, this is what I want, and not having a reason behind it, not having a story behind it, not have anything else, and allowing that desire coming from the heart, not from a space of trying to push someone down, not from a space of trying to belittle something, but from a space of, this is my heart's desire, and this, you either fucking love it or you hate it. And it's a polarization of that inside of the dark masculine, you could say, which is that, like, it's that part in society that rapes, that pillages, that ravishes, that steals, that all of that. That's the shadow side of it. The you could say the more developed dark masculine is the part that just goes in and fucking takes, and it ravishes, and it just knows what it needs, and it gets what it needs, and it does it. But when it's coming from a heart space, that's the space inside of a woman that loves to surrender. So one of the things that I've walked through is that the more I've allowed my woman literally to surrender into her vulnerability, into her space, then I've found my masculine has come on even stronger. And this is one of the pieces with these polarities that is really, I find it's necessary to have a container, a context for people to explore these things, because it's very difficult to sometimes do it in the outside world, which is one of the reasons I love workshop space, because it gives permission for people to come in and to say, hey, like, I want to deepen in this inner marriage, but I know that in doing that, I have to be able to, find a greater polarity of my masculine as well as a polarity of my feminine. And one of the things that, for a man is being penetrated. I just did a video a few weeks ago of my woman being penetrated, and the joy of being fucked to God and all the joys that come with that, and the vulnerability of that. I still have some videos on my phone I recorded recently, and I was just sharing with a friend last night that they're very vulnerable. They're very raw. And I'm like, ooh, that's an edge for me. But I'm finding these edges and I'm playing with it because I recognize it in that vulnerability, in the polarity of both sides of that. There's more spaciousness for love to come in. And I don't know of anything we want more than just to feel that love coming into our life.
Yeah. So with the masculine and feminine polarities, this is something we're going to be exploring at our workshop, and in a marriage, and also evolving in a masculine, connecting in a masculine as a lover. So I'm really, really excited for that. So, and yeah, as you were saying, I love these workshop spaces, which create really safe, beautiful spaces to explore these parts of ourselves. And so what I also love is that I've been teaching like the loving men sets and cancer stuff for a little while now, to women, and just me. So it's just been all women. So it's so beautiful to be bringing a man into the space, to be bringing in you, Aaron, and because a man can just bring a whole different element. And whenever I've done workshops with men, it's like I just want to hang on to their every word. I'm like, tell me more. Like, I want to know from a man's perspective. Like, I want to know everything. Let me pick your brain. So that's how I feel when we have our conversation. I was like, oh, tell me more. And then the other piece to that is that on the second day, we're bringing men in. So it's not just here's this stuff that you're going to learn about yourself and now go out and explore it in the world with men. It's like, no, here's this stuff. Yes, you're going to be exploring it, and then we're going to bring men in. So then you're going to be able to show up differently with men now and explore these vulnerabilities and explore what comes up for you and see what's there. And really see what those vulnerabilities are, and deepen and open yourself, like this opening, like you said, the opening of the vulnerability is the opening to more love. So I'm really excited to be sharing that at our workshop. Which what I'll do is, I'll post the link on here, on the Facebook thing, and if anyone's interested, you can also message myself or Aaron about it, and we can send you some more information. If you got any questions, let us know. Just a couple of questions.
And if you have any other questions from what we talked about today, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're happy to support you in different things. The last question Sam asked was, how did I conquer that nice guy image? I mean, I think I'm still trying to conquer it. It's a very much ingrained part of my being that just feels better being the nice guy that pleases, that takes care of things. So being the dark masculine penetrative one that doesn't give a fuck. Like, it comes through sometimes, but I'm learning to bring more heart to that, and I think that's a piece, especially, you know, for men, when you come into this like spiritual world. It's like there's this praise of, oh, EJ was like, you're looking a lot like Jesus this morning. And Jesus is very much that embodiment of that nice guy, like light masculine. He's sweet. In my journey, I'm finding ways to bring in more of that dark masculine, taking energy that's coming from the heart, that isn't unconscious, that's very much like knows directly what I want, as I want, and is clear. And I know in the bedroom when it comes out, it's fucking sexy, and the feedback is always much love, you know, from women in that state. But to bring it out into conversation, into connection, is another whole, you know, thing. So it's really it's dissolving it, still knowing how to be a nice guy in many ways, but moving through and finding my own vulnerability with saying things that I don't normally say. So yeah, great question, Sam. Thank you.
So how to be a nice guy and fuck a woman to God.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how to be a nice guy and still fuck her to God. I mean, I think it's a longing, and I mean, it's a longing inside of my woman. It's like the video I did, I was talking about how my woman, you know, was longing to be fucked to God, and I had a dear brother of mine, energetically, who fucked her to God, and I was literally had tingles running down my whole body, and I was like, oh my fucking God, I wanted this for so long. So it's like I got in touch with my own womb, with my own longing to be fucked, and as a result, like the polarization of feeling such a strong masculine coming in was like, oh fuck, I can feel this more, and I can dance inside of these polarities even more.
I feel like there's a good live stream in there, Aaron. Like how to be a nice guy and
how to be a nice guy and still fuck her to God.
Yeah. There's one more question here, and then I'm going to have to go because I've got a client. But Laura wrote, if a male partner states he is 100% neutral but is 100% fully immersed and sexually intimate and attracted, 100% fully with me, is this his way of communicating his vulnerability and lack of commitment? Interesting.
I didn't actually hear all that question because the rain came down.
Okay.
Just speak up a little bit more. I can hear it.
Yeah, so if you look on the comments.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what she's saying. Okay, so it feels like you're saying that he wants to be sexually intimate, but he doesn't want a relationship? Is that what you're saying? I'm not quite I haven't said neutral. What do you mean by neutral? We'll see what she says.
Well, I think I remember seeing that question. It's like finding these levels of wanting intimacy and knowing boundaries, because, you know, and it's like the best way to find all of this is exploring, and it's exploring, like we were talking about before, like being able to be intimate with someone without needing it to put a ring around the finger and make it something like long term. Like, it's finding ways to deepen inside of connection, inside of intimacy. Maybe that's sometimes having penetrative sex. Maybe that's just kissing. The vulnerabilities of kiss, different things, of being willing to go in deeper without needing it to look like a particular way. It doesn't always have to lead into a monogamous white picket fence, I'm now married with 2 children, you know, relationship. It can just be the beauty, the magnificence of connecting with someone for an evening, for a day, for a year, for 10 years, whatever it is. But as long as you're continuing to remain inside of your own inner marriage and your own inner integrity, then the sovereignty to choose is what comes alive.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. I think on that note, we will finish. Sam, if you want to know what Aaron teaches, please go to his profile and follow him. He does amazing work with men, helping to be better lovers and awesome leaders. I don't know if that was the right wording, but something like that.
All kinds of good stuff. Helping men be more conscious. I just had an online course I just finished not too long ago, a man's conscious guide to the bedroom. You can find that on my profile and all that. But more importantly, if any of this, if you're in the Byron Bay area, they're in the Brisbane area, Gold Coast area, it's the 19th and 20th. EJ and I are going to be teaching all of this conversation for a group of women and having some men come into it. So if you want to have to do with any part of that, send us a message. The link to the event will be in here. I think the early bird was till May 1st, which I believe, is that today? What day is today?
No, May 1st. No, it's a couple of days.
Yeah. So you still have time to get the early bird and to come and come explore these polarities inside of yourself. It's one of the most. I'm about to tomorrow starting. I'm assisting on a level 2 with ISTA, which is all about a lot of these polarities and bringing it out. So the more that you give yourself permission to explore these things, like that's where the growth comes in. That's where the transformation comes in, and it's doing it in a held container that's safe, secure, open, and available.
Thank you. And we will be demonstrating tantric cock worship ritual. Just to put that out there.
On its way out here.